Assalamu alaikum, family. Peace be unto you. Today, we are going to explore a subject that is heavy, but it's necessary. We're going to be talking about genocide. Not only the form of genocide as defined by international law, but as it lives and breathes in our communities through what some sociologists call economic genocide. So be a friend and tell a friend. We're going to be right back after a few short announcements. Let's pray, and we'll see you in a few.
O Allah, guide me among those whom Thou hast guided aright, and preserve me among those whom Thou hast preserved, and befriend me among those whom Thou hast befriended. Bless me in whatsoever Thou dost grant me, and deliver me from the evil of what Thou hast judged. Surely Thou judgest, and none can judge against Thee, and he whom Thou befriendest is not disgraced. Blessed art Thou, O Lord, and exalted be Thee above what they set up besides Thee. I bear witness, nothing deserves to be served besides Thee, and I bear witness that Muhammad is Thy servant and apostle. Amen.
The Honorable Elijah Muhammad, who in my judgment is the master historian, taught us that of all our studies, history is the most attractive, and it is best qualified to reward the researcher. History is most attractive. Why should history be most attractive? Because history is the recorded time of the human family in its struggle to overcome obstacles. There is no life that is without struggle. The Holy Quran teaches us that man, meaning man and woman, is made to face difficulties. And after difficulty comes ease. But it is history that guides us through difficulty. For if you know how people who had difficulty yesterday got through, and if your difficulty is somewhat similar, then today we also can get through if we follow the guidance of history. This is why Carter G. Woodson and many of our black giants fought for black people to know our history. Because in not knowing our history, we don't have a guide. And without a guide, we are lost. No wonder the Bible...
Assalamu alaikum, family. Peace be unto you. Welcome to the Sajdah Morning Coffee Talks, where we talk about life, love, and business. You all know that. Thank you to each and every one of you who have been supporting these missions that I've been on in these past few years. from the Mind of an Entrepreneur movement to the development of the Elijah Muhammad House Museum. Thank you to everybody who has just been emailing and who are excited. Some of y'all getting a little bit of a whiff of what we're working on, and you've been very supportive, and I'm so grateful, so grateful. And thank you to each and every one of you who have purchased the book, Art and Science of Business. There we go. I put that up there so, excuse me, so you all know where to go and get the book. Thank you. Shout out to Brother Mandine, Brother Jamil, and all the brothers over at Crow. We had a great time yesterday talking about business and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Listen, I'm not even going to go into it. I was about to go into the living and alive spirit of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and how he just helps and supports. And yeah, anyway, let's get into our subject, okay, before we veer off somewhere else. All right. As I mentioned in the opening, grab y'all coffee and text your friends, text your sisters and brothers, and remind them that we're live and we're talking about a very powerful subject. So we're going to talk today about economic genocide, okay? And we're going to break it down from just the general definition of genocide that we see defined by the United Nations and international law, and then by what the sociologists call economic genocide. One speaks on the destruction of life, and the other speaks on the destruction of the means of life. But together, they explain much of the struggle and the extraordinary resilience of oppressed people across the world, but more specifically to us here in Black America. I was talking to somebody about this subject, and they were saying, man, there's economic genocide that just happens within our circles, right? Within our friendship circles, within our family circles, where people are putting that, here's the thing. And I want to say this because a couple of you had questions about our read before we get into the subject. When you are working on something and you are on a mission, everything, every project, whether it's Apple or Meta or whatever, it's got to start small, and you start somewhere. Here's the difference oftentimes between us and communities where our parents and friends and family members sometimes are either jealous or afraid for us. Kind of all comes out the same, right? Whereas in the broader community, there's usually support. You're starting a small business, you're starting an effort, a movement, and the family members are like, yeah, keep going. It's going to build. And oftentimes what we get is people expect us to go from 0 to 100 overnight. And so sometimes that discourages us. But I just want to tell you, don't be discouraged. That's part of a systemic economic genocide. Now, let's break this down. And this was a chapter that I didn't put in the book. But I thought we'd talk about it. There were 3 or 4 chapters that didn't make the book that we're just going to turn into podcasts. So you'll see some of these subjects and you say, oh, that seemed like that would have went well in the book. We didn't put it in there. Or I didn't put it in there for a reason. I always say we, because even if I'm alone, it's me and Allah. That's what the minister taught me. All right. In 1948, okay, right after the Holocaust, the leaders of the world gathered at the United Nations to create what was entitled the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. Okay. And in Article 2 of that treaty, if you don't know it, you should go and get it. Genocide is defined as this. Genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group, such as 1. Unaliving members of the group. 2. Causing serious bodily or mental harm. 3. Deliberately inflicting conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction. 4. Imposing measures intended to prevent births. And number 5, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. Okay. What I want you to notice here is the emphasis on intent. Intent is very subjective. This is where oftentimes when we present our case as Black people, the goalpost of intent begins to move. We're going to go a little deeper into it. Genocide is not just the mass taking of life. It is the deliberate intent to erase a people. Okay. You've seen international courts that have applied this definition to Rwanda, Bosnia, and of course, the Holocaust. It's not yet been applied to us. But it's got a very narrow framing, okay? It focuses on physical and biological destruction. Now, I want to define intent because intent is critical to how this law is applied. Intent is the state of mind or the purpose with which an act is carried out, okay? Now, in law or in legal terms, it signifies a conscious decision and a determination to achieve a specific outcome, distinguishing deliberate actions from accidents or unintended consequences. Okay, so very specific, very deliberate. We're not talking about accidents or unintended consequences. So in the context or in the framework of genocide and economic genocide, intent means that the harm caused to a people, whether through physical destruction or through systemic denial of economic capacity, is not, in my opinion, incidental. It is the result of deliberate planning, policies, and practices designed to weaken, erase, or control a group. Without intent, oppression could be argued that it's a byproduct of inequality. But when you apply intent, it exposes these actions, these systemic actions, as organized, targeted, sustained. Okay? So think of an organized, targeted, sustained campaign against a people's survival and sovereignty. When you see things like the statistic I mentioned yesterday, where if the US were to close the racial wealth gap, work to close it, then the GDP of the United States would have 1 to 1.5. That's the estimated amount of money that would be added to the GDP. And if you have a deficit of 1.8 trillion, to me, you'd be focusing on saying, okay, let's see, how can we reduce this deficit? How can we close this racial wealth gap? Because it's going to pour that much more economic development into a falling system. So in essence, could this be a way to help cushion the fall of the dollar? Right? one could argue from an intent standpoint that if that is not your focus, if you have millions of people out here who are disenfranchised, and your focus is not to save your own self by uplifting these people, then one could say that the intent of those systems is economic genocide. But see, the law hasn't really caught up to economic genocide. I want to also define it. Economic genocide is the intentional destruction of a people's capacity to survive and thrive. The intentional part here, we can prove that. Not always, we can prove it by what you do, but we can prove it by what you don't do. The neglect, to me, also proves intent. So let's define it again. Economic genocide, okay, is the intentional destruction of a people's capacity to survive and thrive. It's not just about unaliving people. It's about destroying the futures of people, defining them as criminals, saying that they came out of the womb as criminals. That's a form of genocide, because one could argue, what is the intent of a statement like that if a person is charged with the responsibility of uplifting, securing, helping, or whatever a specific people, if they're neglecting it and defining those people in a way that impacts their ability to matriculate through a system successfully, then one could argue intent. What does it look like? When I define things like denying access to land, so systems that deny us access to land, even you and I, when we are predatorily acting a certain way, when we are preying on each other, we are participating in the economic genocide of our brothers and sisters. When we go out and we sell drugs to our people, we're participating in the genocide. When we have friends and family members and close people who are trying to hurt us, who are being negative, who are trying to steal, who are stomping on people's dreams, that's participating in economic genocide. So when the system denies us access to land, access to capital, access to credit, ownership, okay, that's economic genocide. When generational wealth transfer, when the transfer of generational wealth is blocked, that's economic genocide. Burning down businesses, stripping natural resources, ensuring dependency, okay, is a form of economic genocide. Now, I want to break some of this down. Let's talk about predatory lending that burdens Black families with higher rates despite equal creditworthiness. When we talk about predatory lending, we generally talk about interest rates and things like that, but we're not talking about all the predators that you meet along your way of getting a loan. And I'm not talking about people who got to charge for services. Y'all know I'm an entrepreneur, so somebody provide a service, I believe that they deserve their fee. But oftentimes, when you set out to get a loan, not only is the lender preying upon you, but the broker, the people along the way, the person who set you up with the loan, everybody's trying to get a big slice of the pie. And so the overall system of it becomes very predatory. There's another concept that I call redlining 2.0. It's algorithmic bias and gentrification masquerading as development. stripping entire communities of ownership. So when these algorithms are put out here that are biased against our community, that is a form of economic genocide, especially when the internet or social media or some of these means of development have become important ways in which people are closing the employment gap. Things like wage gaps and underfunded schools that keep neighborhoods locked in a cycle of scarcity. Not providing programs that help young children who are growing up without a father, and then they say, well, it's not our fault they don't have a father. Well, wait a minute, because you just did mass incarceration, which is a form of genocide. And then you have all of these children, all these young Black boys that are growing up without a father. And then a lot of times fathers are in the house and they don't even care. You stripped our men of leadership in their families. It used to be where the male in the family or the males in the family would look out for the mother, the sister, the wife. That was just how it was done. But you stripped them of that mentally and physically. Mass incarceration, prison labor. You extract the value from Black bodies, but deny reinvestment into our communities. Something you all hear me talk about, these antitrust and anti-competitive violations are forms of economic genocide. These are various systems that embedded within those systems is a biasness towards our community. And when you look at the collective systems, it makes up economic genocide. So antitrust and anti-competitive violations where corporations and institutions collude to shut out Black entrepreneurs, blocking access to supply chains, manipulating pricing structures, and using legal loopholes to maintain monopolies while suffocating fair competition. I could go on and on. These systems may not carry torches. They may not carry guns, but their impact is deadly. It's deadly to the spirit of a people. This is why you have to have some other form of faith other than those systems. You got to bring into your participation of the system a power higher than yourself. No weapon formed against me shall prosper. There is a table prepared for me in the face of my enemies. See, these systems, these economically biased systems devastate us by draining our generational wealth, stifling entrepreneurship, and erasing our sovereignty, all under the guise of business as usual. And you may still be saying, yeah, but where's the intent? The intent is in the people who have the responsibility of providing programs, who specifically take away programs or specifically don't practice fairly. That makes a difference. All right. So how do we compare the UN's definition of genocide with what is happening here in the United States of America to Black people? Genocide, as defined by the UN, is about taking life. Economic genocide that I'm talking about is about taking the means of life. Remember, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan teaches us that business is the activity of life itself. So if there are either people individually or systems that are taking away our means of life, that's economic genocide. One you can see through the massacre and bloodshed The other hides behind the facade of policies, regulations, and economic systems that appear legitimate, but are devastating. The United Nations definition does not contain a very crucial phrase, deliberately inflicting conditions of life calculated to bring about destruction. Or it does contain that. Let me say that again. Let me say it better. The United Nations definition of genocide contains the phrase, deliberately inflicting conditions of life calculated to bring about destruction. And by this definition, economic genocide could and should fall under the same category. What are predatory loans? What are discriminatory housing practices and anti-competitive marketing structures? See, they're so embedded in our way of life that a lot of us, we don't even know that we're impacted by it. But the world is really has not been willing to apply this definition to this form of economic genocide that has been deployed against us. Why? Because doing so would mean acknowledging that whole nations have built their economic empires on oppression, exclusion, and exploitation. It would mean recognizing that Jim Crow laws, redlining, and antitrust violations and discriminatory labor practices were not isolated mistakes, but deliberate designs. It would mean admitting that the denial of fair wages, and some of y'all say, well, this ain't none of this happening today. No, the reason why you may not feel like it's happening to you is because you've been reduced into a clone of a colonized minded person, and you think you living a good life. You think you're doing good, but you probably are getting paid less than what you should be getting paid. You got people who are so smart and so together in our community, but they may have to do a job that in another community would be reduced to or would be limited to somebody of a much lesser intellectual capacity. See, to apply that logic and use that UN definition and charge economic genocide, you'd have to admit to unfair wages. You'd have to admit to the concentration of land ownership, the manipulation of supply chains, the exclusion of Black entrepreneurs from contracts and capital. See, these are modern instruments of genocide. There's not necessarily any guns, but there's policies. There's distribution strategies. It may not be a burning down of your home, but it's the use of zoning laws and eminent domain. That's why you see in Chicago, the more modern zoning laws and the planning department is very, very strict when it comes to zoning and what they allow in certain areas and certain communities. And they straight up will be like, nope, that ain't happening. Because this has been such a tool that has been used against us in particular, especially marginalized people, not only in Chicago, but around the country. To acknowledge this truth would require dismantling the myths about democracy, about capitalism, about fairness. You'd have to call out monopolies, like what Master Fard Muhammad saw himself doing at 6 years old. You'd have to call out monopolies. You'd have to call out corporate collusion. You'd have to call out government complicity. And that truth is too large. It's too inconvenient for the international and corporate governments and all of them to face. They just can't face it. Because if you really look at what has been done to us, it amounts to genocide. So these two forms of genocide are not separate. In Black America, economic genocide has always been the silent partner to physical genocide. I'm going to say that again. In Black America, economic genocide has always been the silent partner to physical genocide. Y'all know our story begins with slavery. Before the lashes, before the chains, before the plantations, okay, came the stripping away of land. And I'm including our indigenous people that were already here, stripping them of the land, taking away their freedoms, and of course our freedoms in general, taking away our identity, stealing our labor, suppressing our culture and our ability to accumulate wealth. All of that was deliberately erased. You had slaves doing slavery time that hired themselves out, and they could go out at night and work like a side hustle. So maybe they were slaves during the day, work a side hustle, but they had to bring part of that money back to whatever plantation they lived on. So not only did they work during the day for free, if they were a blacksmith and the neighboring plantation needed somebody to help make horseshoes, they could go there and do it and earn money in exchange for the service, but they had to bring some of that money back. This is how you hear about people saying they were able to buy their freedom, because from the residual of what they could keep, they may have saved up to buy their freedom or the freedom of the family members. But the entire economy of this nation was built on that theft, while laws and customs made sure we could not build it for ourselves. When emancipation came, the violence didn't stop, it just changed form. 40 acres and a mule became a broken promise. Black farmers who managed to acquire land were cheated out of it through discriminatory lending, legal trickery, and violence. Sharecropping locked families into generational debt, while lynchings and massacres sent a clear message: prosperity for Black people could cost you your life. Even as bloodshed, the physical bloodshed kind of slowed down, the economic warfare remained relentless. Jim Crow sealed Black communities into cycles of underfunded schools, segregated housing, discriminatory unions. When Black neighborhoods began to thrive, places like Bronzeville in Chicago or Haiti in North Carolina, urban renewal, highway construction, and gentrification tore them apart. This is why today, if you have an opportunity to help a Black person make a difference, you should be doing it, because of what we've been subjected to, what we're all subjected to our entire lives. Today, the same patterns persist under new names. Mass incarceration steals lives and labor, then brands survivors with records that block opportunity. Predatory lenders target our families, draining wealth through payday loans and inflated interest rates. Venture capital, government contracts, and fair banking remain disproportionately out of the reach for Black entrepreneurs. These are not accidents. They are conditions of life carefully designed to leave our people dependent. This is why when you see in the book, I interject the ways in which we can shift from our focus on money to our focus on power. Yes, we need programs. Yes, there's money that is needed, but we have to think about the power. There's power in our unity. There's power in me supporting your business. There's power in me helping your child find a good school. There's power in me getting behind your program or you getting behind my program. There's power in our pooling of our resources. So if somebody just writes us a check, that serves a need. But the true power is in our unity. This is why I say economic genocide often precedes physical genocide. In a lot of ways, for us, it's now merging together. But generally what happens, if you look at any of these UN reports, first they weaken the people, strip their institutions, strip them of their independence, their means to provide for themselves. Then physical destruction becomes easier because the foundation has already been eroded. And even after the violence passes, the economic chains remain, ensuring dependency for generations. So let me be clear. In Black America, economic genocide is not background noise. It is the constant rhythm that has underwritten every wave of violence, every policy of exclusion, every system of control. And unless we confront it directly, it will continue to determine the conditions of our lives. We have to start confronting this directly with our politicians. And you may not confront it in a total concept like I'm explaining it here, but if they're talking about certain policies, you should be looking at it, at those policies, at those campaign promises, at those practices of those corporations with an eye that is focused on how is this going to impact your people? And if you don't care about how it impacts you, how is it going to impact your children? Okay. See, right after emancipation in the mid-1860s, Black Americans owned virtually no legally recognized wealth. Many were still enslaved. So let me give you some statistics here. So hold on. Per capita, the white to Black wealth gap was about 60-1. I got this from a study that they did in Princeton. Over the decades, some of this gap narrowed. By 1920, it was down to around 10-1. But by 2020, the ratio had been settled at around 6-1. In other words, despite some progress, Black Americans today on average hold only about 1/6 the wealth of white Americans. The narrowing that once seemed possible has now been stalled. Go back to that statistic I gave you. Here's another one. The cost of this suppression. Let me give you the statistic. Remember, I just gave you the other one. I said, if the racial wealth gap was closed, studies show that the U.S. GDP would gain as much as $1.5 trillion. We got a deficit of $1.8 trillion. The losses from unpaid wages and lost inheritance to Black descendants is at about 20 trillion. Okay, that's according to the Bush Foundation. Losses from unpaid wages and lost inheritance to Black descendants is about $20 trillion. Land ownership, one of the most direct paths to wealth, has also been devastated. Between 1920 and 1997, the number of Black farmers declined by 98%. That erased not just the property, but independence and community stability. The wealth gap today is wide. The median difference between Black and white households is $164,000. That's according to the RAND Corporation. I love the RAND Corporation because I get my healthcare statistics and a lot of stuff from there. But the median difference between Black and white households is about $164,000. If you close just half of that gap, it would require $7.5 trillion. And eliminating it entirely would take about $15 trillion. In terms of the national pie, white households are about 68% of the population. They control 86% of the U.S. wealth, while Black households are about 15 to 16% of the population, and we hold about 3% of the wealth. So to close that wealth gap, and I think this should just really be a cool think tank, and somebody's probably done it, to close that wealth gap I'm talking about, where we would add $1.5 trillion to the GDP. Some say it's going to take about $7 or $8 trillion. I don't know if it's going to take that much, but some people would say that that amount of money would have to be infused into the system. What about reparations? They print money anyway, right? So why not give us reparations, close that wealth gap? You're going to get the money back anyway. The majority of us, probably 80% of us, are going to put it right back into the system. Where else are we going to put it? There's not a lot of us that are going to go running overseas with our money. So if all of us got a check, if you got a check tomorrow for $1 million, by the end of the year, you will have put it back into the system, whether you buy a house, whether you pay off all your bills and say, I want to live debt free, whether or not you buy some land. Okay. Research shows that families whose ancestors were enslaved have significantly lower levels of income, education, and wealth today compared to Black families whose ancestors were free before the Civil War. I'm gonna skip past some of my statistics because I want you guys to. I may publish this. Let's go back into intent, because this is the part that I think that is most intuitive. Y'all all right? Let me see what y'all doing in this chat over here. Okay. In international law, okay, genocide hinges on intent. It is the deliberate decision to destroy in whole or in part a people. To me, that's the part that you got to prove. When we examine the trillions that were lost, and some of those statistics I just gave, the 98% collapse in Black land ownership and the enduring racial wealth gap, it becomes clear these are not random byproducts of inequality. They are the results of laws, policies, and practices consciously designed to strip Black America of wealth and independence. And I know some people say, I'm so tired of talking about slavery and Jim Crow. You can't erase the history. This is why it's important that we have this conversation. And for those who are not of our community, who don't understand how this benefits you. Because you're talking about a whole group of people who have not been invested in, who have not been supportive. And so there's a financial circle and there's money to go around. And what smart business person wouldn't go and say, let me conquer a new market? The reason why a lot of people don't is because of the economic genocide, whether they are conscious of it or not, because there's systems in place that make them feel like, I probably shouldn't. See, by the standards of the 1948 Genocide Convention, which includes deliberately inflicting conditions of life calculated to bring about destruction, economic genocide against Black Americans is real. It fits within the legal framework. What makes it invisible is not the absence of intent, but the refusal of people or nations to acknowledge that their wealth and power were built on that intent. See, but to go from being predators to being investors, and as an investor, you probably will make more money, but the definition of power will change. Now, from a spiritual perspective, economic genocide is not just about theft of money. It's really a theft of our divine inheritance. It is an attempt to block a people from fulfilling their God-given mandate to build, create, and govern themselves. But as Master Fard Muhammad declared, he came to give us our inheritance. This is why entrepreneurship, and let me say this. I'm not just saying that the inheritance he's referring to is economic, but I'm saying that that's part of it. There's a divine inheritance that is rooted in our knowledge of self and our alignment and submission to the will of Allah. That knowledge of self, that knowledge of submission and how to submit and what does it mean as defined in our English terms as Islam. Islam simply means submission. Muslim means one who submits to do the will of Allah. I think most of us are all thinking about that. We're either submitting to Satan or we're submitting to Allah. So that's part of the inheritance. That is the overall inheritance. But this, what I'm talking about, is also a part of that inheritance. That is why, in my opinion, entrepreneurship, land ownership, cooperative economics are not just business moves. They're acts of resistance. They are acts of resurrection. Every business we build, every block we reclaim, everything that we're doing, every institution, everything we're encouraged to do in this book, The Art and Science of Business, we preserve. I see it, I won't say preserve, I see it as a blow against economic genocide. And for those who have resources that are bold enough to say, I'm not going to practice predatory capitalism. I'm going to invest and partner in a community, in an untapped market. You will be a part of a future power structure. Let's break this down a little bit before we go. We got about 10 minutes. Let me give you some scriptures. Okay. I put this together and I first came, really out of the Bible and all of that, but I wanted you to see it from a statistical and economic standpoint first. But let's go to Exodus 14, verse 5 through 9, 5 through 28. Pharaoh, enraged that the Israelites fled, sent his army, 600 chosen chariots, and all the might of Egypt to bring them back into bondage. The Israelites, afraid, questioned if they were brought into the wilderness to die. Moses declared, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm. The Lord will fight for you." And then God parted the waters for Israel, then closed them upon Pharaoh's army, ensuring deliverance and breaking the cycle of pursuit. See, Pharaoh's pursuit symbolizes the relentless systems of power designed to drag oppressed people back into bondage. Or I should probably say to keep us in bondage, whether it's through slavery or debt or policies or prison or economic traps. See, the divine lesson is clear. God makes a way of escape. And what once pursued us shall be no more. And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad gave us the tools of power. Remember, it's not about money. It ain't really about religion. It's about taking back our power, taking back our sovereignty. And then the spirituality comes in, because as we become gods, we are not taught to become savage and do to others what has been done to us. Nowhere do you find in the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad or the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan where they've asked us or charged us to be violent or to hurt anybody. That's how much faith there is in the process that he taught us. Because we are taught to learn leadership and learn service. So when we as the bottom rail are raised to the top, we have to ask ourselves, how will you govern? How will you handle these people? So I study leadership. I study governors and presidents, and I study how will you govern now that you are in charge. Here's somebody who has been abusing your people. What do you do? Because we've never been charged with being violent. We're taught to fight with those who fight with us. And so you will find us being very peaceful people. But there's a power. I share in the art and science of business an account of Master Fard Muhammad, who as a child envisioned the Rockefellers and the DuPonts cast into a lake of fire. These families symbolize modern pharaohs, architects of economic systems that launched genocidal attacks on our people. But just like Moses parted the sea, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught us principles that part the waters of oppression and open the pathways to our sovereignty. When we hear the program and teachings of the Nation of Islam, we often make the mistake of seeing it only as a social or a religious or a political movement. But it is far more than that. It is a divinely inspired system of healing, restoration, and nation building in the face of centuries of economic and physical genocide. Everything from the dietary law to the moral conduct, to the respect and protection of women and children, to the cultivation of knowledge of self. These aren't arbitrary rules that we just tell us that we just do to look good. These are strategic prescriptions designed to repair what has been deliberately broken. These behaviors, this self-improvement process is the antidote to the genocidal conditions prophesied in the Bible. The dietary laws alone are a defense against health genocide. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad in How to Eat to Live warned against the poisons of processed foods, pork, and overeating. And today, Black America is disproportionately affected by food deserts, obesity, diabetes, and heart disease. We lose over 100,000 people a year to cardiovascular-related diseases alone: diabetes, stroke, high cholesterol, conditions rooted in systemic denial of healthy food access. Life expectancy for Black Americans remains about 6 years shorter than whites in some regions, according to the CDC. Dietary discipline is not just about health, it's about resisting the slow genocide of food apartheid. But we got an antidote to that in the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Let's talk about the moral conduct and discipline as resistance to social engineering. Drugs, alcohol, cycles of violence were systemically introduced into Black communities as tools of destabilization, tools of destabilization. The nation's emphasis on clean living, sobriety, and discipline removes those weapons from the enemy's arsenal. It restores stability to our community, preserves our mental clarity, and channels energy into constructive nation building. Most time nowadays, when you see Black people getting taken down, it's usually in the moral space. You're doing something you probably shouldn't be doing. They've been watching you for a long time. They get a bunch of evidence. As soon as you step out of line, they go, boom, we got you. They just waiting. When you do something small, they say, that ain't big enough. We waiting. And so they just watch you and they monitor you and they're very patient. Let's talk about respecting and protecting of women and families as a restoration of our sovereignty. During slavery, Black women were exploited, families were torn apart, and generational trauma was embedded into our DNA. Today, we got mass incarceration, poverty, state violence continues to destabilize the Black family. But the nation's teachings, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan's teachings elevate women as the cornerstone of civilization, the first teachers of the child, and protectors of our culture. So protecting and honoring women and families ensures the continuity of our nation. There's power in all of this. This power combats the economic genocide that has been unleashed against us. When we continue to violate these things, we are participating in our own genocide. You got the knowledge of self. See, the knowledge of self is immunity against psychological genocide. The greatest theft of slavery was not only labor, but identity. We were stripped of our name, our language, our culture, our history. Black people were made dependent and vulnerable. Today, this manifests as internalized racism, colorism, media distortion, and a school system that still omits Black brilliance. Knowledge of self reverses this. It restores pride, confidence, clarity. It empowers us to see through the lies and reclaim our divine destiny. Some of us we see ourselves in such a low way that we're literally paralyzed. Our vision of ourselves has limited even what we can manifest. But we got an antidote to that. Let's talk about the economic program. The economic program of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is a weapon against poverty and exclusion. Y'all heard me just give I didn't give all the statistics because I don't want to bore y'all, but the one I did give, modern statistics revealed the scale of economic genocide. The racial wealth gap is about $164,000 per household. Black households hold only 3% of national wealth, while making up about 16% of the population. And Black land ownership has fallen by 98% since 1920. But the nation's program on separation, cooperative economics, land ownership, business development speaks directly to these crises. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad told us in Message to the Black Man, he said, 6 or 8 of you pool your resources and go into business for yourself. I've done that with 3 of my friends here with the Art and Science of Business movement. 6 or 8 not 6 or 8 of us get together and get with the government. Not 6 or 8 of us get together and get with the mosque. Not 6 or 8 of us get together and get with the church. 6 or 8 of us pool our resources and go into business for ourselves. This is an antidote. This is an access to power that he's given us. He didn't say, let's over focus on getting resources. Yes, we need the resources. Yes, we need money. What I'm saying is the art and science of business movement is a supplement to what you're already doing. A lot of us are out here fighting on the Hill in Congress, trying to get economic development and money and resources to invest in our community. I want you to take this book and add on the power moves that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad gave us to help us combat this systemic genocide. Add this on to your program. This is a supplemental book. Don't allow yourself to be reduced to binary thinking, going, okay, well, that's that Muslim stuff. No, no, no. See, when Pharaoh pursued the children of Israel, it was not just to destroy their bodies, but to prevent their freedom and independence. In the same way, the systems of America have pursued Black people through slavery, Jim Crow, redlining, mass incarceration, economic exclusion. And up until 1930, we didn't have a solution for it. And many of us still don't believe in the solution because they packaged it to where they're like, well, that's those people who believe in that religion. No, this is access to power. The Nation of Islam teachings are divine technology. Divine technology of survival. So I'm telling you, whether you believe or not, and even if you're a white person out there, you don't have to be afraid of it, because it's a divine technology that has taught us how to survive. These teachings part the waters of oppression. They provide what I'm calling a pathway to our sovereignty. They're the antidote to genocidal conditions of life calculated to bring about our destruction. So while that UN definition talks about erasing life, economic genocide talks about erasing or acts on erasing your means of life, erasing your ability to access the activity of life. Both are intentional, both are destructive, and both require us to respond with equal intentionality. Our survival depends on seeing through these systems. And then if you're still saying, how do we do it? I just gave it to you. There's a way to combat healthcare genocide. There's a way to combat the educational genocide, the moral genocide. There's a way to do that. I want us all to take away this assignment. I'm closing, y'all. Study the economic history of your community. I want you to support Black-owned businesses. Invest in cooperative ventures. Teach your children that wealth stewardship and generational wealth is a sacred duty. Because if genocide is destruction, then our work, our entrepreneurship, our preservation, our nation building is the science of resurrection. Grab your copy of my book. The Art and Science of Business is designed to supplement what you're already doing, inspire us to do more, and ignite us to do something. You can go to artandscienceofbusiness.com to get it, or you can just go straight to Amazon to get it. Okay, let me holler at some of y'all in the chat before we go. We're going to close out here. I'm sorry for keeping y'all a little longer than normal. We got Brother Lamont in the house. Thank you, Brother Lamont. Look, y'all, be a friend and tell a friend. Share this, because y'all know the algorithms. They probably going to hit me with the violation of community guidelines or something. So we got to share it. We got to make this stuff go viral. Dress code. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Happy Saturday, Mom. My mom has a big following on Facebook. Don't y'all go over there trying to follow her, because she got some private stuff going on. But she shares this information. We have to share it with all generations, all walks of life, all ages. because we all can use some self-improvement. We all can use some self-improvement. Sister Aletha, she's one of my partners with the Art and Science of Business movement, really focused on financial literacy. We got Sister Sajdah, which is going to be focusing on law and the prevention of criminal activities and the choices of criminal activities in our community. My sisters are beasts in what it is that they do. 6 or 8 of you go into business, pool your resources and go into business for yourself. We got Sandra D. They're also active members on helping with the Elijah Muhammad House Museum. Sandra D is in the house. Assalamu alaikum, sis. She said, happy family Saturday, blessings to the power will bring so the power will bring the money. It's the power. See, the power that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us, Sister Sandra, is what gives us a leg up when we start talking about economic development. The trap is in the violation of what he taught us. Sometimes we know to do it and sometimes we don't, but the trap is in the violation. Take simple eating 1 meal a day. Take simply eating the wrong foods. It's going to kill you. You're going to die an early death. That's the healthcare genocide. That's the systemic part of it. You're going to then find yourself caught up in a healthcare system. And that's a whole nother story. Brother Mandine Muhammad said he's watching and listening. Thank you, Brother Mandine. I shouted out you and Brother Jamil and the brothers and sisters over at Crow. Thank you so much for hosting me yesterday. I really appreciate it. Let's see who else we got here. Sister Betty. I see you, sis. Let's see. Brother Mandine said you teaching. Praise be to Allah. Thank you. I see Sister Dawn. Sister Dawn is also one of our board members, and we're going to be going to Atlanta real soon. She said, excellent talk today. I just received my book yesterday. Looking forward to getting into it. Thank you, you all. Do me a favor. Take a picture of yourself with the book and tag me on social media and go to Amazon and put a review in there. Okay? Talk about how you felt about the book. Say something profound about it. Let's not hide what we're doing under a bushel basket, because as you can see, not only will we as a people benefit, but the United States and the country as a whole will benefit. And some people say, well, why would I want to help them? Well, look, whatever Allah decides to do, that's on him. Let us be found qualifying ourselves to be leaders. All right, family, I'm going to let y'all go. I'm going to let y'all get out of here. If nobody has any questions, I know we're about 10 minutes over. I'm going to go. We'll be back, inshallah, next week. Join the mailing list and stay close, because when we get ready to send out, information about what's happening, some of the events, some of the places I'm going to be speaking at, we got a few things happening, a few things popping up. If you want to book me, all you got to do is send me an email, mindofanentrepreneur@gmail.com. We can do book signings. We could bring the team in. We could do one of our talks. We're working on some very powerful stuff for the Elijah Muhammad House Museum. Yesterday, we were at 119 emails just in the last month of you all ready for the Elijah Muhammad House Museum to open, Sajdah House to open. Last night, we were at 127. So I got a few emails to respond to over the weekend, but keep it coming. We are ready, and that's just this month. And some of you know how long this has been a journey, and we're almost there. We got an amazing new program that we're going to be launching and coming out with very, very soon. We need your continued support. Freedom ain't free. So if you go on to the website, ElijahMuhammadHouse.com, there are ways in which you can support, become a sponsor. You can support the play we have coming up. You can support the launch of the series that we have coming up that we've been filming. We have a partnership that we've done with the University of Chicago and Princeton Inroads. And we have been filming now for almost a year. And we got some things that we're working on with the city of Chicago, who has been very, very supportive and really looking out. We got a lot of stuff we're working on. We need continued donations. We've got to get finished. Okay. And we're very, very close. Very close. So without further ado, I'm going to just go. I'm going to let y'all go. I can't think of anything else. I think I told you everything. Just stay close. Stay close on social media. Stay close on the mailing list. I'll send out notices when we get ready to do other things. Okay, family. May Allah bless you. I'm wishing each and every one of you more love, more goodness, more connection with Allah than you've ever experienced or imagined. And I want you to remember that it's not personal. It's vibrational. It's not always about the money. You have to consider the power moves as well. All right. So get your copy of the book, Art and Science of Business. And we'll be at a city near you or a bookstore near you or a museum near you very soon. All right, family. Assalamu alaikum.